Fathers of Reddit went out for some milk and never came back. How'd you move on with life? When I was around 3, my dad left for work and never came back. This was in the early 90s and he managed to pull this disappearance act off by cutting all the phone lines in my family home before walking out the door. He managed to stay in hiding for a few years. Without child support or his income, my mother simply lost the house after trying to stay afloat for years. My father moved on by simply refusing to admit that any of this happened. Kind of the opposite, my dad was abusive, so one day when he went out to get the paper, my mum, sisters, and I left and never went back. The whole family went for smokes without him. My theory: tobacconists and convenience stores have been running a human trafficking ring for decades using kidnapped fathers. We're kidnapping them and sending them on to orphans in need. Don't worry, you still have your mother, unless you don't, which isn't organized crime's problem. We worry about the destination, not the source. I don't know with my bio dad. Him and my mother pretty much split up when I was around 3 years old. He would always pick me up for visits during long weekends and school holidays, but this stopped after I was 12. He never came to pick me up for another holiday, or even call or message me. He just vanished. Fast forward 12 years later, I finally managed to make contact with my paternal sisters. They never lived with either and lived with their mother, who I have always adored to bits on Facebook, and they tell me has cancer and is dying. I decide I want to speak to him. I never had a bad experience with him or anything like that. It would have just been nice to say hi and goodbye and just catch up, I guess. I called. I told him who I was and he put the phone down on me and blocked me. A few months later, his wife then invites me to his funeral. I basically went to see and comfort my sisters. His wife was super nice as well. My mom's dad liked his ladies young. When they aged out, he moved on and started a new family, setting up franchises, as Tyler Durden said. He died after falling down some stairs. Roll credits. We call that the Tom Cruise. My grandma did this twice. When she was 18, she got married and had a baby and got on a bus without a word and left her 1-year-old baby and husband and never spoke to either of them again. We only know my half-aunt exists because of Facebook. She found my dad and reached out a few years back. She looks exactly like my grandma. Then when my dad was 25, my grandma got a bus on again and left without a word. Everyone thought she was dead or missing. My grandpa filed for divorce by missing person after several years. 10 or so years later, my uncle hired a private investigator who located my grandma and found out she was in a different state, married to another man. Eventually, her and her new husband moved back to where my extended family lived. I met her for the first time when I was 12 and we all started spending holidays together. Her, my dad and his siblings, my grandpa, and her new husband. It was super bizarre and she never told us why she left. I'm 33 now and she's in her late 80s and we still don't know what happened. Ask her. People in their 80s have nothing to hide. They know they are on the way out. I had gotten out of the military and my wife and I had moved to a place where we had no friends or family. We had 2 little kids and in no way was I interested in being a family man. In all reality, I was looking for a way out and PTSD was in full effect. So, one day I just packed a bag while my wife was at school and pawned some things to get some cash, so I wouldn't leave her with nothing. When she got home, we were actually really civil with each other and we were talking about the future, but I had made up my mind. I told her I had to run to the store, and she said okay and I said okay, and then my daughter ran up to me, said, "Daddy, get me a surprise." I tried not to cry right there on spot, but I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. I went to the store and sat in the parking lot for a good 20 minutes crying. I then took off. I ended up going to Walmart, got my kids some toys, and my wife some Hostess snowballs. When I walked back into my house, the kids were so happy and my wife was looking at me weird, but never said anything. From then on, I just fought against myself to always be there, and this year my wife and I celebrated our 20-year anniversary. I know your kids would say thank you if they knew this story. Father left when I was a baby. I'm the youngest of 4. We're from Ireland. My father is Scottish. My mum drove us over on the ferry to see him once from what I remember. Then no contact until I was 18. Still don't know why he left. I'm now 30. My sister and brother keep contact, but he just isn't my father. My stepfather raised me, and even though he isn't with my mum anymore and we don't keep contact, I will always be thankful to that man for providing for us and raising us. Both sad and lovely. Sounds like he did a good job. Cheers to him and all the best. I found out a couple years ago that the man I knew as my father wasn't actually my father. When confronted with this, my mother, who had already disowned me over other reasons, denied everything, called me a liar and refused to even acknowledge the DNA proof. I decided to keep digging and found out who my biological father was. Turns out it was a guy she worked with. When I found out, I told my sisters who it was and they were like, that guy. Mum dated him for years. At one point they even talked about marriage. Turns out, I had met the guy at least once, so I am absolutely positive that my mom knew, and based on what I have found I am pretty sure that he knew as well and never made an attempt to reach out to me. By the time I found out, he had already passed and the 7 kids he already had won't really respond to me, so I have given up on making any kind of connection to that family. Still, my entire world was completely shook and rocked, and with the revelation that my mom knew and lied to me, my entire life has forced me to reevaluate my entire childhood, and everything is now in a different light. Sorry to hear that, man. FK those people. Biological dad did this. He had an argument with my mom that we all heard. He didn't think we did, but we did. He then came to us and said, "I'm going to the store." I knew exactly what that meant. I ran after his car as he drove away. I was screaming, "Please come back. I'm sorry." As a child I thought we had done something as children to drive him away. Still to this day, it's the saddest memory I have. That crap will frick you up, and it did for a long time. Years of therapy later, all the kids are doing just fine without him. Please come back. I'm sorry. Crap, that makes me want to cry. I'm adopted, so both of my biological parents didn't want me. My only issue now is that I don't date other Koreans. There's a little voice in the back of my head that taunts me with, "What if you're related and don't know it? You know nothing, Jon Snow." I had a friend in high school who refused to date black or mixed black chicks because all he knew about his father was that he was a man and had made him men half siblings. I am not a father, nor am I a male. The life my dad lived, though, he was left on a curb when he was 10 months old. As a child he was in a group home, and was also an altar boy for the local church, fill in the blanks. He had zero stability, was taunted and called a beggar, was unsure if he'd be able to eat the next day. The few things I say don't even scratch the surface. We've always gotten along, and I love my pops. He was at every game, recital, parent-teacher conference. He's a mean dickhead, but has always been there for me. I asked why and how he was able to do that, and had the most heartbreaking answer. He said that loving his kids feels like it goes against the grain of everything he knows. He has always had to try to love us, and it doesn't come naturally. Ouch. But he broke the cycle of crap human beings who skip out. I know of a man who did that, not literally the milk part, but just disappeared one day without an announcement. He ended up going to another continent and just starting a new life. Then after over 20 years he thought it would be interesting to reach out to his old family and was really hurt by how harshly they reacted. However, from what I know, he didn't want a kid and was resentful to his wife for having one. He thought he was too young to have such a tie-down life. He was mid-20s, and went on to a place where no one knew him. I was hanging out at a friend's house when I had to go pick up some milk on my way home for my wife and kid. To this day I've never managed to get back to my friend's house because being a good dad is taking up all of my social time. Are unexpectedly wholesome. Mine started an internet business, made millions, had a pretty nice life while my mom fought to keep our heads above water. Flash forward 22 years and I meet him for the first time since I was 4. He thought I was still a teenager and had the audacity to call his company his baby. 2 years later he sends me a check for $10K and now I don't have to reply to his yearly "I'm pretty sure you were born around this date so here's $500 to Amazon" emails anymore. The next communication I want from him is a letter telling me he finally got wiped off this planet like the scum he is. He sounds like a dong, but still talk to him enough to get those checks, yo. My dad's family is pretty messed up. My dad is the youngest of 6 kids, 2 full siblings and 3 half siblings. His mom ran away from home at 16 and had 2 kids with my dad's dad. I believe he raised those kids for a few years before leaving them to do whatever he did. Then she got another boyfriend and had 3 kids with him. This was over a 20-year span. By the time she was 40, my dad's dad came back for a couple years. After most of her kids had already grown up and cut all ties with her, they had my dad. But the next year he left, and I don't think my dad really ever saw him. Instead, he grew up with an emotionally unstable mother and an abusive stepfather. My dad never actually ended up meeting most of his siblings, only really growing up with one of them who was 8 years older. My dad's dad ended up dying of cancer years before I was born. And honestly, from how he messed up my dad's side of the family, I think he deserved it. My father left, messed my siblings and I up real bad with lifelong debilitating trauma. He had other children with new wife and suicided, so he totally screwed us all over. I'm so sorry. How tragic for everyone. My dad ended up leaving when I was 3. He'd borrowed $900 from my uncle a week before, took the truck, which was our only vehicle, and just left while mom was at work and I was with my grandparents. He went back to the woman he'd been with before marrying my mom. Dad would call and at first he kept asking my mom to move to where he was, which would have been moving from Texas to Illinois. Mom said frick that noise, divorced him, and raised me on her own. He never even sent child support. For a couple of years, Dad would call and talk to us. Then he stopped a couple of years after that, just before my mom remarried. Then in 2012, almost 20 years later, Dad finds me on Facebook. I think if my mom had still been alive I would have reacted differently, but I was happy to have a parent in my life again. We talked over the phone, but I never brought up the white elephant in the room, which I'm sure he thought I'd ask about. It just felt like something that needed to happen face to face one day. But I never got that opportunity because he died about 1.5 years later. I ended up going to his funeral service in Illinois. When I arrived, I found out only his wife and 3 stepkids knew about me. No one else did. So, there was an emergency family meeting the night before I arrived to let everyone know that I existed. Real quick, wife was physically and emotionally abusive. Kid turned out not to be mine. Not surprised. First marriage. Married way too young. We married when my line of work was sex and danger. After years of some questionable behavior at home when I was away on business trips, found out the hard way that being young doesn't make you bulletproof. So I changed jobs. Spent a lot more time at home. Only working 50-ish hours a week but home a lot more. Everything was always my fault. She expected a full dinner from scratch when she got home. House to be cleaned. Basically for me to do everything. If it wasn't done like that she would fly off the handle. Throw things at me. Hit me. Belittle me. Here's the kicker. I got up and went to work before she got up and came home after her she did. We move across country to the west coast to start fresh. I got a really good job. She picked up a minimum wage job. I'm working 4-5 days a week. She's working 2 shifts a week. Everything gets better for a couple months. Then since I'm home even more, thanks 8-5 job, I notice she's being sneaky. I brush it off. I'm home more. We are able to go out and have fun now. Nope, she's back to being abusive again. Sex life is super rare. Year goes by. She manages to give me a black eye when I walked in the door one day after work. It's 6. Why isn't dinner ready? It's all my fault. Now she's pregnant. I calm her down. Make dinner in total shock. She eats then goes to watch TV while I clean. When I'm done I walk to the TV room and the first words out of her mouth is dinner sucked, don't make that again. I'm in total shock. I turn around and go to bed. Next morning I wake up, see the black eye and call in sick at work. She's still sleeping so I go back to bedroom, wake her up and say I am going to work. I walk out the door and just go for a drive. As I'm driving around I notice an office for my old line of work. I go and talk to the guys and decided frick it, I'm out of this life and going back to my old life. I go home to grab all the necessary paperwork to start the process. I walk in the door, she asks me what the frick I am doing home. I said I forgot something and I'll see you tonight. I grabbed what I needed and left. Lived in a bar for a week until I was able to move to my new job. She tried to sue me for child support. DNA test proved I dodged a bullet. Still cost $80k to get her out of my life. Freaking worth it. Found out later she told the kid I was daddy. Found this out when the divorce was finally finalized. The divorce almost took longer than the marriage. If the kid was mine, I would have 100% waited and taken them with me. Now very happily married with 5 kids of my own that actually mine. I'm glad you got away, and no judgment on you, but I feel sad for her son. I'm 17 years old and I've only met my father once, which was around the 2nd of May years ago, right before our prom night. He lives in Canada with his wife and 2 kids, and he had the chance to go home to the Philippines that time. I had to choose either meeting my father or skipping prom, and of course I couldn't say no to either, so I decided to meet him in the morning and then go home. His hometown is a 3-hour drive away from our school. I'm gonna keep the story short, but basically it was the most awkward and bland first meeting yet. I'd like to even say that his wife was better at spending time with me, but hey, at least I got to meet him. Honestly, I don't think I'm old enough to even say I've moved on, but I just wanna say how lucky I am to have a really loving and supportive family who's been there for me better than my father did. Although there's still a big gaping hole in me, knowing now that there's really missing in my life. NGL. Who doesn't? They've done their best to fill it up for me. I'd also like to thank my boyfriend for being there for me. I think my way of coping is surrounding myself with people, being kind to others despite my past, and just living my best life, knowing even though I never had a permanent father figure, there are people who are willing to help you get up, no matter if they are family, friends, or even strangers. Your parents are the people who raise you. Bio parent doesn't mean crap. You will never know how much you are loved. I don't believe I have moved on. I didn't go out to get anything and disappear. My son's mother is a bit on the loony side and tried to have me arrested every time I picked him up or dropped him off after visitation. I have 4 other children from a previous relationship I went back into, of which I had custody of the children while we were not together. I had to make a choice, tail the chance of winding up in prison each time I visited my son or stop visiting him, so I did not take the chance of my 4 other children missing out on their father because of a heartless bee. Every day I miss him. To me, not being in his life is akin to torture. I now have depression, social anxiety, and PTSD over this situation. Still, I feel as though I am the bad guy. My father left for some smokes. I never wanted to end up the same way. In the end, I gave up custody after a few years of court battles. She was relentless and wanted me in prison to hurt my other children. I just couldn't take the chance of not being in the other 4's lives. Every day I am defeated. My dad left the day I was born. He showed up one day just to sign his rights away so he wouldn't have to pay child support. He ended up staying in the same city we lived in and remarried. His new wife and kids to this day have no idea I exist and I was a student in the school his wife teaches out for 4 years. I tried reaching out to him when I turned 18 and was told to never contact him again because of his family found out I existed, it would ruin his life. He's not your dad. He's your sperm donor. I know it's hard to accept, but he is essentially the exact same as a random sperm donor. He signed his rights away as sperm donors do. Well, my grandpa left his family for cigarettes and never came back. He moved in with my grandma and had 7 children. Stayed with her until he died. God, I couldn't imagine having 7 children with my grandma. Disgusting. My father did this when I was 8. Took all the money and left me, my brother and mom. It was 1990 and the war had just began. We were in Bosnia. It was 4 years of heck before we were able to get out. Now that I have 2 little ones of my own, I can't even begin to think that. I don't know. JBG. My dad didn't really disappear per se, but he did run off for a bit. My parents divorced when I was 9, and my mom moved us across the state with her new fiance. I didn't get to see my dad a lot, and he was the one doing all the work to try and see my brother and I. A couple years ago, we were planning on spending a part of the summer with him. We'd been with him for a few days, and then he disappeared. We couldn't find him for hours. Then my grandpa showed up with police because my dad had texted him. Had a mental breakdown and run off because he thought he was inadequate. Great job, mom. And we'd be better off without him. The thing is, he didn't take his phone with him. or his car. It decent shoes. This was in the foothills outside of LA. He just up and hopped the fence off the property and started walking in Crocs. We went back to my mom's that night, and the police found him. He called us and apologized the next day, and my mom said he had to get help before he could see us again. It's been 3 years since that happened. He's doing much better, and we actually live with him now because my mom is a B and my stepfather is abusive. Glad you're living with a better parent. I wish you the best. Since no deadbeats are really answering this, I'll add my little story as a kid. My old man knocked up his high school ex-girlfriend and her neighbor, my mom, about a year apart. He tried to make it work with the ex, tried to get custody of that kid, fought in court and tried to be a part of his life. Spent years and lots of money trying to get custody away from the now drunken ex. He didn't try one single bit to be part of my life. Didn't want to know me or support me at all. Pretended I didn't exist until I looked him up when I was 30. That's why when you frick ugly girls that you don't want a relationship with, you wear a fricking condom. My mom was the girl you bang that you don't want your friends to find out about, I guess. And that's all it takes. I was raised dirt poor while he was a very successful multi-millionaire. Sorry to hear that. He sounds like trash. Easily. The fact that I was too stupid to wear a condom before knocking up a mentally ill woman that I had no interest in procreating with is no reason to hang around and put up with her BS. My father, probably. Pretty harsh man. The consequences only fell one way. That said, sorry for your own experience in that too. Hope you are doing well for yourself. I know of one person who did that. His wife and children are forever, for decades, wondering where he is. Is he still alive? It's very sad. They had to move on. My dad came back in my life when I was 9. Was divorced from my mom. Never saw him before. Spent 6 weekends in a row with him and his new wife. Then he changed his number and moved to Florida, about 1,500 miles away. Didn't hear from him again until a call when I was 16. Said he was a bad father but wanted to be a friend. Then never heard from him again. I carried a lot of anger until my mid-30s, so I finally called him. Simply told him that I forgive him. He never has to feel bad, but we are never going to have a relationship. He was cool with it. It wasn't for him at all. Purely selfish act. I still get little flare-ups every now and again, but I am a lot less angry. This question is bait to get people's accounts downvoted into oblivion. Well, I know a guy who bailed on his family because he regretted having created mixed kids that did not resemble him, so he emigrated and started over somewhere else. What an incredible piece of crap. How people can be so heartless towards their own children is beyond me. Sometimes a parent may be ashamed of what they have become. In a haze of depression, it seems better that no one see you like this. But you forget how to be happy, and each day didn't used to be filled with this much sorrow and regret. I don't want them to know this is okay. I want them to do good. It would be nice to not have a mom you have to worry about. Last night I laid on an uncomfortable bench because against my better judgment I came on a camping trip with this guy I've been with. He is closeted gay and I'm a woman. This has been interesting. Anyways, I laid on this terrible bench, trying to find 5 things to be happy about. It's so uncomfortable. I don't want my daughter to ever feel like she can't say no to an aggressive man. I don't ever want her to feel so cold and alone. I want to be at least better than this to see them again. But if they will have me in their life in any way, shape or form, I will take it. If they want to throw old cups from their car at me and tell me I'm a terrible mother, I deserve that. I want to say sorry, but with my actions. Like, hey, if I am in your life, I am not someone you have to worry about. Letter from an absent mother. My sperm donor left when I was 8 months old. My mom's mom told me he left because I didn't look like him. In his mind, boys look like their father and girls look like the mother. Since I didn't look like him, then my mom must have cheated on him. Fast forward 40 years and I meet with my half brother and sister he had with a lady he met in a different state. He is dead now and without ever contacting me at all. Ever. Since the top is all my dad did this, I'm guessing people that legit answer this question are either downvoted to heck or just not replying. So I'll sacrifice this throwaway for the greater good. 20-year-old me was overwhelmed already. My own dad divorced my mom to run off with another girl because I was done growing up so he's free, and I never got along with my mom in general. I basically went from parents handling college to parents wanting nothing to do with me. My mom moved back to her home country and I was basically left alone here working part-time at a Walmart, barely making it. Of course I was also young and dumb, so my outlet is parties. I end up getting my girlfriend of 3 months pregnant, though we always condomed up and she was supposed to be on birth control. She wasn't. She basically did it on purpose. Anyway, she refuses to abort for religious reasons. She was never religious before this, so I know she's lying. So there I was, a dad at 21. College is out the window at that point and the Walmart I'm at has basically zero advancement. The girl and I basically despise each other and out pops the kid. I don't get any of those fatherly love feels or anything. It just felt like everything was a lie. My mom gets in touch with me again and is freaking out that everyone around her has these big happy families and hers just fell apart and wants to make amends. I told her my story about how my GF lied about birth control and must have done something with the condoms and she decides to just fly me out. I leave for work one day and instead of turning left to get on the road to the store, I turn right to get on the interstate and head to the airport. Fake passport in tow. That was that. I lived there for 8 years, then moved back to the States and have basically just been laying low since then. My mom's extended family is in a certain business and basically set me up with a new id. It sounds exciting and crazy but it's pretty boring. I picked up a trade and just did that for money while living a simple life. I haven't had a girlfriend since then and really just don't want one after what happened. I'm actually content living the recluse life, playing games and junk at this point. Thank you for your tale. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.